My name's Regina, and I became a single mom when my daughter, Mia, was just 10. My ex-husband, Tom, decided he'd found greener pastures with another woman. Just like that, he was gone, leaving me to pick up the pieces of our shattered family. From that day on, it was just the two of us. I threw myself into work, determined to give Mia everything she needed. I climbed the corporate ladder, worked overtime, took on extra projects, anything to make sure my little girl wouldn't want for anything. The trauma of abandonment hit Mia hard. She became withdrawn, angry. Her grades started slipping, and she'd lash out at the slightest provocation. I was at my wit's end, trying to be both mom and dad, provider and nurturer. Finally, I decided to take her to a psychologist. Dr. Sarah was kind and patient, but even she struggled with Mia's anger. "Your daughter's dealing with a lot of pain," she told me after one particularly difficult session. "It's going to take time, Regina. Be patient with her." Years passed, and things got better, or so I thought. Mia seemed to be healing, growing into a beautiful, intelligent young woman. But there was an undercurrent of resentment that I couldn't quite place. It wasn't until I started trying to date again that I realized the full extent of the damage Tom had done. Every time I'd meet someone new, someone who might actually be interested in me as more than just Mia's mom, she'd fly off the handle. The first time it happened, I was blindsided. I'd been seeing Mark for a few weeks, and things were going well. He was kind, funny, and he seemed to genuinely care about me. I thought it was time for him to meet Mia. "Honey," I said one morning over breakfast. "I've invited someone over for dinner tonight. His name's Mark, and I want the two most important people in my life to know each other." She stared at me, her eyes narrowing. "Is he your boyfriend or something?" I hesitated, not sure how to answer. "We've been seeing each other, yes. But it's not serious yet. That's why I want you to meet him." "No," she said flatly. "I don't want to meet him. I don't want him in our house. Cancel the dinner." I was shocked. "Mia, sweetie, I know this might be difficult for you, but—" "Difficult?" she shouted, standing up so suddenly, her chair fell backward. "You think this is difficult? You want to abandon me like he did? To start a new family and forget all about me?" She stormed out of the kitchen, leaving me alone with my cold coffee and a sinking feeling in my stomach. I should have known then that this was just the beginning. Despite Mia's outburst, I decided to go ahead with the dinner. I thought maybe if she met Mark, she'd see he wasn't a threat. God, was I wrong? Mark arrived at 7, looking nervous but eager. I introduced him to Mia, who barely looked at him. "Nice to meet you, Mia," he said, extending his hand. "Your mom's told me a lot about you." Mia ignored his hand. "I bet she has," she muttered. The tension was thick as we sat down to eat. I tried to keep the conversation light, but Mia's one-word answers and glares made it difficult. Halfway through the meal, Mark made an innocent comment about how nice it was to have a home-cooked dinner. That's when Mia exploded. "Oh, I'm sure you'd love to have this all the time, wouldn't you?" she sneered. "Playing happy families with my mom?" "Mia," I warned, but she was just getting started. "What, Mom? Isn't that what this is? You trying to replace Dad? Trying to throw me away like he did?" "That's not what this is at all," I said, my voice shaking. "I'm just trying to—" "To what? To ruin everything?" Mia stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Well, guess what? I won't let you." Before I could react, she grabbed her plate and hurled it to the floor. The crash of breaking china was deafening in the sudden silence. "Mia," I gasped. "What are you doing?" But she wasn't listening. She grabbed another plate, then another, smashing them on the ground. Food and broken dishes were everywhere. "This is our home," she screamed. "Ours, not his." Mark stood up, looking shell-shocked. "I think I should go," he said quietly. After Mark left, Mia locked herself in her room. I spent the night cleaning up the mess, tears mixing with the soapy water as I scrubbed the floor. The next day, Mia acted like nothing had happened. But something had changed. From that day on, any attempt I made to date was met with hostility and tantrums. Years passed, and I found myself pushing away anyone who showed interest in me. It was easier than dealing with Mia's reactions. I told myself it was temporary, that once Mia was older, she'd understand. But deep down, I knew I was just making excuses. When Mia graduated high school, I was so proud. Despite everything, she'd done well in school and gotten into a good college. I thought maybe now, things would change. "Mom," she said the night before she left for college, you won't bring anyone home while I'm gone, will you?" I sighed. "Mia, honey, you're going to be living your own life now. Don't you think it's time for me to do the same?" Her face darkened. "So you are planning to replace me?" "Mia, please," I begged. "That's not fair. I've spent the last 8 years putting you first. I've given up everything for you." As soon as the words left my mouth, I knew I'd made a mistake. Mia's eyes filled with tears. "So I'm just a burden to you, is that it?" she cried. "A sacrifice you had to make?" "No, sweetie, that's not what I meant at all." I tried to backtrack, but it was too late. Mia stormed off to her room, slamming the door behind her. The next morning, she left for college without saying goodbye. With Mia away at college, I finally had a chance to rediscover myself. I started taking better care of myself, got a new haircut, bought some new clothes, even joined a gym. I reconnected with old friends, started going out more. And then I met David. He was kind, funny, and understood my situation with Mia. We started dating, and for a while, everything was perfect. But Mia, even from college, still tried to control my life. Every call, every visit home, she'd grill me about my social life. "Mom, you haven't let anyone into our house, have you?" she'd demand. I tried to reason with her. "Honey, you're living your own life now. Don't you think it's time I did the same?" But she'd get angry, threaten to drop out of college, say she couldn't focus on her studies, knowing I was replacing her. Once, after finding out about David, she called me in tears. "How could you do this to me? My grades are suffering because I'm so upset about you dating." It was exhausting, constantly walking on eggshells, trying to balance my happiness with Mia's demands. But I kept hoping things would get better once she graduated and started her own life. 4 years passed in this push and pull. Then, out of the blue, Mia called. "Mom, I'm coming home. And I'm bringing someone with me." My heart leapt. Maybe she'd finally found someone and understood why I'd wanted to date. Maybe now, things would change. When they arrived, I was shocked. Mia introduced the man beside her not as her boyfriend, but as her husband. "This is Jake," she said, a challenging look in her eyes. "We got married last week in Vegas." I couldn't believe it. My daughter was married, and I hadn't even known she was dating someone. "Mia," I gasped, "why didn't you tell me? Why wasn't I invited?" She shrugged. "We only met a few days ago. It was spontaneous." They didn't stay long. As they were leaving, I hugged Mia tightly. "I hope you'll be very happy," I whispered, trying to ignore the knot of worry in my stomach. For 6 months, I heard little from Mia. I tried to give them space, hoping they were settling into married life. Then, one rainy night, Mia showed up at my door, mascara streaking down her face. "He cheated on me," she sobbed. "I found him with another woman. We're getting divorced." Mia moved back in, quickly found a job, but showed no signs of looking for her own place. And I, remembering how she'd reacted to my attempts at independence, didn't push her. I was 46, Mia was 24, and we were settled into an uneasy coexistence when the doctor delivered the news that shattered our world. I had intestinal cancer. The diagnosis hit me like a freight train. Cancer. The word alone was terrifying. When I told Mia, she broke down in tears. "Mom," she sobbed, clinging to me, "I'll take care of you. I promise. We'll get through this together." In that moment, all our past conflicts seemed to melt away. I quit my job, thankful for the savings I'd squirreled away over the years. At least we wouldn't have to worry about money on top of everything else. The chemotherapy started, and with it came a host of new challenges. I was constantly exhausted, nauseous, and in pain. Mia took time off work to care for me, and at first, she was attentive and enthusiastic. But as the days wore on, the reality of my condition began to wear on her. The cancer had wreaked havoc on my digestive system. I struggled to use the bathroom, often needing help to clean myself afterward. It was humiliating, but I had no choice. After particularly rough chemo sessions, I'd be too weak to even make it to the toilet. I started noticing changes in Mia's behavior. The loving concern in her eyes was gradually replaced by something else, disgust. She'd wrinkle her nose when she came near me, complaining about the smell. "Mom, you stink," she'd say, not even trying to hide her revulsion. "Can't you do something about it?" I wanted to scream at her, to remind her that I was fighting for my life, that I couldn't control what the cancer and chemo were doing to my body. But I bit my tongue. She was trying, in her own way, and that had to be enough. One day, after a particularly difficult morning, Mia approached me with a determined look on her face. "Mom, I think I need to go back to work," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "We should hire a nurse to take care of you." I nodded, trying to hide my disappointment. "I understand. We'll look into getting a nurse." The clinic where I was receiving treatment assigned a nurse named Sarah to help me at home. She was a godsend, strong, capable, and unfailingly kind. She handled my hygiene needs efficiently and without a trace of disgust. "Don't you worry, Regina," she'd say cheerfully as she helped me clean up. "We'll have you feeling fresh as a daisy in no time." With Sarah's help, my quality of life improved dramatically. But Mia wasn't happy about the arrangement. "I don't like having a stranger in our house all the time," she complained. "It's invasive." I tried to explain that Sarah was necessary for my care, but Mia wouldn't listen. Then, one evening, she dropped a bombshell. "Mom, I've been thinking," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "Maybe it would be better if you moved to a specialized care facility. I could look after the house, and you'd get round-the-clock care." I stared at her, shocked. "No, I'm not leaving my home. This is where I'm comfortable, and this is where I'm going to fight this cancer." Mia's face clouded over with anger and frustration. "Fine," she snapped. "Have it your way." As she stormed off, I felt a deep sadness settle over me. I was fighting for my life, but it felt like I was losing my daughter in the process. As the chemo treatments continued, my body waged war against itself. Each day brought new challenges, new indignities. But nothing prepared me for the day my hair started falling out in clumps. I was in the bathroom, running my fingers through my long, once beautiful hair, when a handful came away in my palm. I stared at it, numb with shock. Mia's shriek jolted me back to reality. "Mom, there's hair everywhere. I'm sick of cleaning it up." I looked at her, standing in the doorway, her face twisted in disgust and frustration. In that moment, I made a decision. "Sarah," I called weakly to my nurse. "Could you please cut my hair?" As Sarah carefully sheared away my locks, I caught sight of Mia in the mirror. Instead of offering support or comfort, she was laughing. "You look like an alien," she snickered. "Maybe you should get a wig." Her words cut deeper than any surgeon's scalpel. That night, after Sarah had gone home and Mia had retreated to her room, I cried silently into my pillow. Where had I gone wrong? How had my sweet little girl turned into this cruel stranger? Weeks passed, and I continued my battle against cancer. Every day was a struggle, but I was determined to fight. Then, one afternoon, Mia dropped another bombshell. "Mom, I'm having some friends over for my birthday next week," she announced casually. I blinked in surprise. "Here? Honey, I don't think that's a good idea." "The noise. I need rest." Mia's face hardened. "If you don't like it, you can go somewhere else for the night." Actually, that might be better. I won't have to be embarrassed by you in front of my friends or deal with the smell. Her words hit me like a physical blow. I'd been bedridden for days, barely able to move. But in that moment, fury gave me strength. I pushed myself up, fixing her with a glare that would have made my own mother proud. "This is my house," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "If you don't like living here with me, you're welcome to leave." Mia's eyes widened in shock, then narrowed in anger. "You're so selfish," she screamed. "All you think about is yourself. You know what? It would be better for everyone if you just died already. Then you'd stop being such an inconvenience to everyone around you." The room fell silent. I stared at my daughter, unable to believe the words that had just come out of her mouth. In her eyes, I saw no trace of the little girl I'd raised, no hint of love or compassion. Just cold, hard anger. "Get out," I shouted, surprising even myself with the force in my voice. "Pack your things and get out of my house. Now." For a moment, Mia just stood there, shocked. Then, with a scream of frustration, she stormed off to her room. I could hear her throwing things into bags, slamming drawers. Minutes later, she stormed past me, bags in hand. "I hate you," she spat as she reached the door. "I wish Dad had taken me with him when he left." And then she was gone, the front door slamming behind her. She didn't even bother to close it properly. The open door mocked me, a glaring reminder of Mia's dramatic exit. I sat there, staring at it, feeling utterly drained. Finally, I reached for my phone with shaking hands and dialed my friend, Linda. "Linda," I croaked when she answered. "I need help. Can you come over?" Linda arrived in record time, concern etched on her face. She closed the door, then rushed to my side. "Regina, what happened?" The whole story poured out of me, Mia's cruelty, her harsh words, her abrupt departure. Linda listened, her face a mix of shock and anger. "Oh, Regina," she sighed when I finished. "You need to forget about that ungrateful girl and focus on yourself. You're fighting cancer, for God's sake." We talked for hours, tears flowing freely between us. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the living room, I came to a painful realization. "It's my fault," I whispered. "I raised her to be this way. I always put her needs first, ignored my own. I thought I was being a good mother, but I was just teaching her to be selfish. From now on, I'm going to be selfish. I'm going to think about myself for once." True to my word, I threw myself into my treatment with renewed vigor. Sarah, my nurse, was a godsend, helping me through the worst days with gentle care and unwavering support. 2 more rounds of chemotherapy followed. They were brutal, leaving me weak and nauseous, but I refused to give up. All the while, my phone remained silent. No calls, no texts from Mia. I tried to tell myself it was for the best, that I needed to focus on my health, but the silence hurt more than I cared to admit. Months passed. Then, during a routine checkup, my doctor smiled at me, really smiled, for the first time since my diagnosis. "The cancer's receding, Regina," he said. "You're not out of the woods yet, but this is very, very good news." I left the hospital that day feeling lighter than I had in months. The world seemed brighter somehow, full of possibilities I'd thought were lost to me forever. I was thin, almost gaunt, after months of illness. My clothes hung off me like sacks. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like myself again. I started taking short walks in the park near my house, feeling the sun on my face, the breeze in what remained of my hair. One afternoon, I stood in front of my closet, realizing none of my old clothes fit me anymore. Instead of feeling sad, I felt liberated. It was time for a change, inside and out. I spent a day sorting through my wardrobe, making piles to donate to a local homeless shelter. As I packed up bags of my old life, I felt like I was shedding more than just clothes. I was letting go of the old Regina, the one who'd let herself be walked all over, who'd put everyone else's needs before her own. Looking around my big, empty house, I realized it no longer fit the person I'd become. It was time for a change. With my savings providing a comfortable cushion, I made a bold decision: I wouldn't return to work. Instead, I'd downsize and focus on living. I contacted a realtor and put my house on the market. It sold quickly, and I found a small, cozy apartment that felt like it was made for me. It was perfect for one person, bright, manageable, and full of potential for a fresh start. I invested the remaining money from the house sale, feeling financially secure for the first time in years. Life was good, peaceful. I spent my days exploring my new neighborhood, trying new hobbies, and simply enjoying the act of being alive. Then, 3 months after I'd settled into my new life, I received an unexpected call. It was the realtor who'd handled the sale of my old house. "Mrs. Walker," he said, sounding uncomfortable, "the new owners of your old house are having some issues. They've asked for your contact information. Is it all right if I give them your number?" Curious and a little concerned, I agreed. Shortly after, my phone rang again. This time, it was the new owner, a Mr. Thompson. "Mrs. Walker," he began, his voice tense, "I'm sorry to bother you, but something strange happened today. A young woman tried to break into our house. She tried to use a key at first, then started trying to force the door open. When I confronted her, she became hysterical, screaming that this was her house, that she should inherit it after her mother's death." The blood drained from my face. Mia. It had to be Mia. She thought I was dead and had come to claim her inheritance. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Thompson," I said, my voice shaking. I think that might have been my daughter. We've been estranged. She must have assumed." "Your daughter?" He sounded shocked. "But she said you were dead." "I've been very ill, we haven't spoken in months," I explained, not wanting to go into details. "Mr. Thompson, could I ask a favor? If she comes back, would you call me?" He agreed, and we ended the call. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to continue with my new, peaceful life. But I knew I couldn't. This confrontation had been coming for a long time. It was time to face Mia, to finally say all the things I should have said years ago. The call came sooner than I expected. Just a day after my conversation with Mr. Thompson, my phone rang. "She's here," Mr. Thompson said, his voice tense. "And she's causing quite a scene." I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. "I'm on my way." The drive to my old house felt surreal. As I pulled up, I could hear the shouting before I even got out of the car. Mia's voice, shrill and angry, carried across the yard. "This is my house," she was screaming at the Thompsons, who stood on the porch looking shocked and frightened. "Get out now." I stepped out of my car, and for a moment, the world seemed to freeze. Mia turned, her eyes landing on me. The look of shock on her face quickly morphed into one of fury. "You," she spat. "You're supposed to be dead." I felt a calm settle over me, a stark contrast to the chaos unfolding around us. "I'm sorry to disappoint you, Mia," I said, my voice steady. Mia's face contorted with rage. "What's going on? Why are these people in our house?" "It's not our house anymore, Mia," I explained. "I sold it." Her eyes widened in disbelief, then narrowed in anger. "You can't do that. It was supposed to be mine. I was supposed to inherit it when you died." I couldn't help but let out a bitter laugh. "I'm sorry I inconvenienced you by surviving." Mia's face turned red. "You don't understand. I have debts, I need money." I shook my head, acutely aware of the Thompsons and the small crowd of neighbors who had gathered to watch the spectacle. "I don't owe you anything, Mia. You abandoned me when I was fighting for my life. You wished me dead. Why should I help you now?" "Because you're my mother," she screamed. "You're supposed to take care of me." I felt a sadness wash over me, but I stood my ground. "No, Mia, not anymore. You're an adult. Your choices, your consequences." Mia's face twisted into an ugly sneer. "You know what? Dad was right to leave you. You're useless. It would have been better if you had died." Her words hung in the air, shocking even the onlookers into silence. But this time, they didn't cut me to the core. This time, I felt only pity for the angry, bitter woman my daughter had become. Without another word, I turned and walked back to my car. Before getting in, I addressed the Thompsons. "If she comes back or tries to break in again, call the police," I said, gesturing towards Mia. "She has no right to be here." As I drove away, I caught a last glimpse of Mia in my rearview mirror, her face a mask of shock and fury. But for the first time, her anger didn't touch me. I was free. In the months that followed, I embraced my new life fully. I took up painting, finding joy in splashing colors across canvas. My health continued to improve, and each day I felt stronger, more alive. Mia never called or tried to contact me again. Sometimes I felt a pang of sadness for the relationship we'd lost, but mostly I felt relief. I had spent so many years trying to fill the bottomless pit of her needs. Now, finally, I was living for myself.
Alright, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick? Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, "I'm thirsty." Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong. Mike, what have you done?" Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here." "He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part." I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.